Alright guys, I was gonna go straight from the dome for this video, but I got my book here and I have a decent amount to talk about. Something I've been thinking about is a reply that I got to a video. Let's just change the microphone directivity here. There we are. I got some green tea, and I also have a Werther's, because you're usually supposed to have green tea with, or any type of bitter tea with something sweet. So, the thing that I was thinking about, and I've been thinking about for a long time, is beauty and how it's defined. In one of my previous videos, I said it was like defined by both functionality and aesthetics. And I sort of want to explore that a little more. So, something that I realized is that, or a question that I asked myself, I should say, is something that is only beautiful but not at all like functional, that doesn't serve a purpose, still beautiful? Yeah, is something that is aesthetic still beautiful if it doesn't serve a purpose? It's not functional. And on the flip side of that coin is something that's purely functional, only made for a functional reason, not for aesthetics, also beautiful. I don't know. And the equation that I've had in my head for a while about beauty, like the formula for it, is like aesthetics times functionality. And so if you're zero beauty, or no, if you're zero aesthetics and 100% functionality, there would still be zero beauty, because 0 times 1 is 0. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it is true, but there's a more nuanced discussion to have with this, and what I wasn't considering before, and I am considering now, is if something is aesthetic, that sort of breeds its own functionality, and that functionality is maybe the emotion that is evoked by the viewer of that aesthetic thing. Maybe that in itself is the functionality. Maybe it's the emotion that it evokes. And same thing, vice versa, with functionality. Making something that is purely functional, it also breeds its own aesthetic. So, like, think of brutalist buildings in Russia or something like that. They're purely functional, but there's something like interesting there. It's the brutalist aesthetic. It became its own thing, even though aesthetic, I doubt, was really really a thought in the minds of the people architecting these buildings. It's like aesthetics, functionality breeds its own aesthetic, and I sort of like that aesthetic. Think of the ThinkPad, for example. It was made to be completely functional, and in that, it's a bit like clunky looking. It's a bit it's a bit bulky. It's not slim and streamlined like a lot of the products that exist now, that exist with this aesthetic image in mind that people are trying to bake into the product itself. And so functionality breeds its own aesthetic. I think the ThinkPad looks decent. At least the X220, the ones after that. Still, like, X220, that era is the pinnacle, I'd say. Now, what else did I say here? Oh, okay, I forgot about this. I wrote here, there are many reasons people choose to run Arch Linux. One of them is like due to creativity. I think there's a perceived intellectual barrier for using such a system. To some extent, that's true. it takes more of an intellectual creative to want to use art. There's something to be said about people who explore both sides of themselves. Like, you have an intellectual side of yourself, but you also have that creative side, and if one is underdeveloped, it sort of like stomps on the other a little bit, and it's you become, I haven't read Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I just know there's a little man with a big ear and like a big mouth or something like that. And so you become disproportionate, not in like a physical sense, but in a metaphorical sense there. You need to be more well-rounded, I think, to be effective as a person, as effective as possible. But maybe not. I need to think more about that. So I'd say philosophy is more of a creative endeavor, and I still think that's true. Like, creating philosophical books is something creative, and having those thoughts, original thoughts, is like a creative process. But it does require thinking and pondering a more logical approach. I've met people who claim to be into philosophy but never developed that those logical modes of thought required to explore such a space. Like, I worked a minimum wage job at some department store, and there was one philosophy major, and he fit the stereotype of philosophy major perfectly. Because it was all like, I guess, surface level thinking, touted as being more like a sophisticated thing, and I realized that philosophy shouldn't be a major on its own. Like, thinking is important, but it should exist as a byproduct of thinking more logically. Philosophy is sort of like the creativity aspect of logical thinking. And so you get people like Rene Descartes, I mentioned in my writing this morning. Rene Descartes, he was remembered for his philosophy, but he also is remembered for, his conception of the Cartesian plane, which he created, like a two-dimensional unit space. So, without that more logical understanding of the world, he couldn't have applied it to philosophy. He couldn't have created all these philosophical ideas that were really targeted and in-depth and explored thoroughly. That made sense. So, what else did I write? Yeah, I said Rene Descartes was a brilliant philosopher, but I think that's because he was also a brilliant mathematician as well. You can't divorce creativity from logic. And then I kind of thought about it a bit more. I said, but actually, I think you can. It's like aesthetics and functionality. Maybe something can be beautiful if only intended for the aesthete. Aesthete. I've read this word, asthete, and it means somebody who appreciates aesthetics. I don't know how to say it. It's something can be beautiful if only intended for the person who appreciates aesthetics. And something can be just as beautiful if intended for the functionalist. And this gets back to what I was saying before. Pure functionality breeds its own mechanical, brutalist aesthetic, and that can be appreciated. Something purely aesthetic can find its function in the admiration and the connection with the viewer and the emotions that it may evoke. It's about all I wrote, really. So, I still think that you can't divorce functionality and aesthetics in the equation that equals beauty. But it is the case that if you have functionality, it's necessarily true that you have aesthetics and vice versa. So you can't really exist, You can't really have one without the other. So we do find things beautiful, even if they're just purely aesthetic, because they're not. They're not just purely aesthetic. It doesn't exist. I've gone through 2 of these where they're originals. They're very good. I like them a lot. And they work good with tea. I discovered that after breakfast, like 10, 15 minutes ago. Yeah, 15 minutes ago. And it's pretty solid. You know, you pop one of these like a Zin, and then you drink a bitter tea. And it's a delightful experience. So yeah, that's about all I have for today. Thank you for watching. I need to clean up the kitchen now, so bye.